There is a role for every citizen in this process. We want you to make sure to bring forward all of your creative ideas, the suggestions and thoughts, and you can share them here. You'll be able to share them here at the podium, as well as an email, which is sharedservices@westchestergov.com. So certainly on behalf of County Executive George Latimer, it's my privilege to welcome you here this afternoon. County Executive will be here momentarily, but we want to make sure to respect everyone's time and get the show on the road. You certainly have the opportunity for the Shared Services Program. This is the Westchester version of the Shared Services Program. It's based on legislation signed by Governor Andrew Cuomo that requires the county and local officials to develop a statewide plan to eliminate services and to save money and, above all, reduce property taxes. New York State has also set aside $225 million in matching state funds, the monies that county saved by shared services. So, without further ado, I want to make sure to introduce our team that's here. It's led by Dr. Jim Malatras. He's the president of the Rockefeller Institute of Government, where he's leading the Institute's modernization effort to offer policymakers evidence-based policy analysis and recommendations on timely topics, specifically this. He certainly has a lot of titles, but something, he is well known around the state for all of his energy and effort in leading the work that we have here at the Rockefeller Institute. Let's give Dr. Malatras a round of applause. Joe Benjamin is the Associate Vice President for Regional Engagement and the Director of the Benjamin Center at SUNY New Paltz since 2008. He's got to the university's highest rank in 2002 when he was appointed Distinguished Professor by the SUNY Board of Trustees. He currently serves as the Chair of the Department of Political Science, presiding officer of the faculty, and for 12 years, the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Let's give a round of applause. Patty is a professional municipal manager responsible for implementing governing board policy and supervising operations, including personnel and finances. Over a span of 30 years, she has served as either the CEO, manager, or the chief administrative officer for several municipalities in New York State, including the village administrator for the village of Pleasantville, a position that she held for 14 years. Let's give Patty Dwyer a round of applause. Make sure we recognize that. We pointed out Emily Salton, the Deputy Director of Operations. Certainly we have many members of our team here. And without further ado, it's the video first, or is it Dr. Malatras? Dr. Jim Malatras. Give him a round of applause.
You may not be clapping afterwards. You may be so bored. You say, oh my God, why did I clap for that guy? Good afternoon on this beautiful day. This is probably the best building where we had a public hearing overlooking the Hudson. So thank you to Ken and the county executive and this entire team. To Jerry and Patty, who are the brains of the operation. I don't know what I am, I'm just the mouthpiece, but they'll answer all of your tough questions. And I always like to joke with Jerry, he has a center named after him, right? The Benjamin Center. So that's something, we want to go very quickly about what the process is and what the law is about, because it gets kind of confusing, but in its confusion, it's basically simple. How do you work together better among governments to share services, but not just to save money, to produce a better result for people, right? This is about how to produce better results for people, and then we want to hear from you. That's why we're here. We have a website too to go along the Westchester website, so we have a lot of opportunity and ways of getting in touch with us. So what is the Shared Services Program? You're going to hear this a lot. We love acronyms in government. The CWSSI program, which was really the Countywide Shared Services Initiative. What is it really? What does it require us to do? And the basic law is what it requires us. It requires counties, every county in the state, to convene local municipalities to develop and approve plans to lower the cost of local government by finding efficiencies in shared services. Every county leader has to convene a panel of all the chief officers, elected officers and officials of local governments across their county to develop the plan. And really, this is the three-part process. The first one is establishing the process. The county did one last year. County Executive Latimer wanted to reconvene the panel to take a deeper dive into the process and potentials that we could find. So that's what we're engaged in now. So we have every city, village, town, and school district who want to participate. They don't have to, but they are able to participate, as well as some special districts. On the panel, I think we convened the first meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we had more than 100 of our officials arrive. So there's real interest in doing something new and taking a deeper dive. We are now in the process of developing the tax and shared services plan. We are meeting with every municipality in the county. We are talking to as many people as possible. We've been talking to county departments and others to sort of get the best ideas to put out to the public to say what is interesting to them and what's interesting to you. And the final part of this, which comes at the end, is there's a match that the state will do. They'll give a match to the first year of shared services. So as much money as we can save in the first year for the county, you'll be able to get a match by the state. Some of the background about why the state got involved with this is because there's a lot of layers and types and ways of convening local governments in the state. More than 7,000 town special districts, 58 water conservation districts, 2,400 private not-for-profit corporations like LDCs and IDAs, towns, villages. It gets really complicated, really confusing, and really fast. That also drives certain things. We talk about it all the time. You don't have to hear it in Westchester things. You hear about it all the time about the property tax level, and that's one of the reasons why the state wanted everybody to get together and work together on developing plans. And the added piece, I'm not talking about stuff you put on a steak or a salad, but this is the federal tax law, which has a dramatic effect on states like New York, and it has a dramatic effect on taxpayers within counties like Westchester, and that's going to add a different pressure point now for folks, and that's why we want to work together to find ways of lowering the cost of government overall. In year one, this is the second year of the shared services plan program that the state has convened. In year one, 34 counties submitted a plan. Westchester's one, I'll talk about that in a little bit. There were 389 projects that were submitted and approved, and more than $208 million of savings in the first year. It's a little bit. Hello, County Executive, how are you? The first year, there was a lot of one-time costs in there, about $208 million. But going forward, the county's found about $75 million on average of recurring savings, which the law requires recurring savings. So about $75 million from 34 counties. There were several areas where we really found the many projects that came together. Public health and insurance had 25 projects, about $14 million of savings. Public health insurance costs were one of the major cost drivers for local governments. Many local governments came together to form health consortia as a way to lower the overall cost of health insurance while not diminishing the benefits of folks in their community. Emergency services was another area. That doesn't mean necessarily eliminating positions or departments and things like that, but enhanced 911 services and cooperation, enhanced services on emergency response, ambulance, and other things, those types of issues. Sewer, wastewater management, and water systems, that was another major area. Energy procurement was a big area. LED lighting, efficiencies. Westchester County was actually a model that many municipalities followed, because Westchester County, and many of the municipalities in Westchester County are leading the way with community choice aggregation and other things, sharing in the costs, or putting together collective purchasing power for energy costs with the renewable and energy efficiency component. So that's one area which was driving a lot. And then you see some other things. Many municipalities did it differently. Some focused on municipal court consolidation in upstate communities, because there's sometimes like 3 or 4 people every 4 or 5 months going to court. So why would we have a court for 3 or 4 people every 4 months? So they were working together, but that was jointly worked together to come up with that plan. It was solely a bottom-up process. Just small things which saved a lot of money. I like to talk about this because it doesn't feel like a lot, but to the community it's a lot. There were some places where they wanted to share cherry pickers. You know what a cherry picker is? The exciting thing with cherry pickers. You go in that bucket and you go up and you can change light bulbs. Well, why do you need that? School districts rent cherry pickers every year to change the light bulbs in the gymnasiums because the gymnasiums are really hot. People are now sharing their cherry pickers in communities, which save $5,000 to $10,000 a year for a school district, but $5,000 for a school district are a lot of books, uniforms, and things like that, so why throw money away? So it ranged from consolidation of functions to sharing of services. Westchester submitted in year one. This was a snapshot where the first plan came up with about $1.2 million of savings. We're going to build on top of that. The county executive set a very ambitious goal for us, and if we don't meet it, I have to walk home to Albany. So I'm going to do a good job, hopefully, with Jerry and Patty, so I don't have to walk home because it is far away. If you look at how Westchester matched up in year one, their initial plan versus some of our other communities, this is the highest property tax counties in the state, and you get to the lowest property tax counties in the state, and the bars you see here are the amount of dollars that each county saved. This was Westchester, the highest tax county, and among one of the lowest savings plans. And I think that's why the county executive wanted to revisit this, get community input, really put together a deep dive in the plan, because there's so much more we could be doing. And if you just take a small county like Montgomery, which is about an eighth of the size of Westchester, they produced about $4.5 million in savings in year one alone. So there's real opportunity to work together and find some things that could work for everybody and produce a better result governmentally. But that's not to say, of course, Westchester hasn't done anything, and communities across Westchester have been doing things, right? We recognize that Westchester has been a leader, especially villages and towns, and special districts and school districts, working towards becoming more efficient. You've been doing it for a long time, based on a lot of, basically, by the way, citizen participation. The energy space was driven solely by citizen participation. That's why energy efficiency is happening in Westchester, because of citizens coming to meetings like this. So we're going to build on those past successes. I'm a very visual guy. This is the old light bulb system versus the LED lighting system. I'm very... Finally, I want to just go through the process a little bit about what we're doing and what the process requires under the law. Let's put a lot of words on the slide for you. So the county executive is known as the chief executive officer under the law, has to convene the panel and identify options. Every mayor or chief elected official, town supervisor of every city, village, and town have to be on this panel. There are optional members, like members of the school district, or BOCES, or special improvement districts. Many are participating on a voluntary basis to be part of this process under the county executive's direction, which is important. They're showing leadership because the county executive says everybody should have a seat at the table, everybody needs to be part of the process. Folks have to put together a plan, and then they have to vote on the plan. And a majority of votes for each individual idea carries the day. So if there's a majority of votes for one proposal, it gets to move forward. The plan has to contain recurring savings, so it can't focus on just one-time payments, one-time costs, something that's a recurring property tax savings through actions. And this is actually in the law, eliminating duplicative services, shared services such as joint purchasing, shared highway equipment, shared storage facilities, plowing services, energy and insurance purchases, cooperatives, and the reduction of back office administrative overhead. And better, which we really like, is the better coordination of services, which is this really comes down to, is how do you better coordinate services. Right now, and this is why we added 2017, if you submitted a plan like Westchester did in 2017, you have a chance to withdraw the plan and re-amend the plan, which is what we're in the process of doing. And now we go through the process. We have to submit our draft plan to the county legislature by August 1st. They don't officially vote on the plan, but they can offer comments and give their own counter ideas and then submit it back to us to incorporate back into the final plan. The final plan is due to be voted on by September 15th of this year, so it's a very quick turnaround. There's not a lot of time to do this. We recognize it's a summer months, people are waiting for the kids to graduate things, so just the fact that you're here today shows how important this topic is and how important it is to get folks. If the plan is successfully adopted, it gets submitted to the state, and the county executive signs his name, and we submit the plan up. We have to then have a public hearing describing what the final plan is by October 15th of this year. So that's the basic working process that we have right now. The substance of this, it gets a little confusing for people. Not everybody has to agree to everything in the plan or do everything, because sometimes what works for one town doesn't work for another town. What works for one school district doesn't work for another school district. In the law, they call it the opt-out process. You have to opt out of doing something. Jerry and I and Patty, we kind of are a little subversive. We call it the opt-in process. The way we do it is, if we're going to put a bunch of things on the table, and if municipalities want to opt in, they can opt in. They can vote and say, we want to do that. We feel it has a much different approach, and it creates a different environment for people. Instead of saying, no, we're not going to do something, to yes, we're going to do something, that little thing helps spur more collegiality and cooperation among folks. You have to provide notice and things like that, but really we try to get people to opt in all across the board. Here's another thing that comes up quite a bit, that, you know, when they see consultants show up, the consultants come, they're just going to tell us what to do in our government. You can't really force us to do things. Sorry, Jeff. It's like the dramatic music, right? You were expecting someone to walk in, unfortunately, it's still just as powerful that you have to listen to it. We don't, the law, the shared service law by the state doesn't create any right of this panel to usurp existing laws. So let me give you an example, which often happens. This panel can just come in, the county executive can just come in and eliminate my school district, and they can just vote to eliminate my school district. No. If there's a law saying you have to go through a public hearing process and a referendum to do something like consolidation of service, which exists in our law today, local control, that doesn't change. All they can do is recommend to the communities that that can happen. And hopefully what we're doing by interacting with you is the community wants this to happen. That's what we're going to put in the plan. So often what gets put in the plan on consolidations are things that require local input and control and votes. We want to hear from the community first before even entertaining the idea, because this panel doesn't have any more rights to do things. Only things that they have the rights to do that they can insert now. So if a town supervisor can enter into a shared service agreement under the law, he can, as part of this panel, enter into a shared service agreement. It doesn't give any new rights to the chief executive officers of any place. You have to follow the existing home rule and other municipal laws now. We get stuck, whenever we put all the plan together, we have to determine what the taxpayer savings are. This gets a little confusing for folks, because many of you all live in the county. Some live in a town and then a village. Some live in the city, but then not a town or a village. So how do you then separate and divide up the tax savings for people who may live in multiple layers of government? If you have a shared service between the town and the county, for instance, and you're a town resident who's also a county resident, how do you divide that money? We leave that to Patty and Jerry to figure out. But really what we do is we do the whole numbers, and we leave it to the local governments to try to figure out how they want to share the services. And we've done this in multiple ways. One way is they just put it into a general pot. They came to an agreement and said whatever the savings are, we divide by the county resident, and everybody gets the same amount. Others have said we want to be more specific. Our town did this shared service, so we want to get the savings. But that's going to be left to the panel and community input about how you want to actually share those savings going forward. The law is silent on that point. So there's a lot of flexibility for folks to come up with their own ways of doing it. The law requires that the panel consult with labor, and that means every collective bargaining unit in the county. That doesn't sound like a lot, but there are a lot of collective bargaining units in the county. So we have already begun with the process. They're reaching out to us, we're reaching out to them. We're going to get their input. They don't have a vote on the panel, but they have the ability to give input, which they will do like they've done in every other piece. Here is the timeline on the screen. We started this process in the spring. August 1st again is when we get into the county legislature body, the county legislature. All 3 public hearings have to be done by, we have 3 public hearings. They have to be done before the final submission of the plan and vote, which has to be done by September 15th. We then we have to do a hearing by October 15th to lay out what we actually agreed to, and then it gets submitted and has to be approved by the state one way or another by January of next year. Our approach, really quickly, we believe in the bottom-up consensus approach. I think the county executive made that his mission when he wanted us to help work through this plan. It doesn't help for us to come in and say, this is how you should run your community. I don't know how to run your community. It's for you to say to us, this is what makes sense to us, how do we make this happen? So that bottom-up consensus approach is important. If there's not consensus to do things, and it seems possible, that's not really the way the county executive nor anybody else wants to do it. So that working together is key into making this work long-term, because you have to live with this process. Here are some of the major areas. Shared services is one of them. Consolidation is another. Better coordination, surprisingly enough, comes up a lot, but that is an issue often. We're just not talking enough and coordinating our services, and then eliminating some of our duplication, which is a little different than consolidation, software and other things. Who does what? There's different ways this can happen. A county can take over the service for everybody. That happens in some of these cases. Sometimes the county facilitates the shared services among multiple municipalities, right? So the county is just helping people share in equipment, and in IT, and in back office functions, and in personnel sometimes. We have more highly specialized personnel that we need sometimes. And sometimes municipalities on their own, which the law allows for, can form their own partnerships. So the county's not really involved, but they oversee it, they know what's going on. But 4 towns get together, or a village and a town get together, and they form a partnership, which is all part of this plan. So you can see different variations in iterations of how this happens. For us, we like to focus on the overhead, not the people. Efficiency in government to improve services is our main goal. We want to help reduce taxes, and all those things are not mutually exclusive. You can focus on services. You don't have to necessarily focus on the FTE, the employee. You can focus on the efficiency in government to improve actual service for the communities. Has anybody been to the DMV? I'm sorry. I used to have to run the DMV. You know, put that on your resume. I ran, But, right, you always have that notion that government is always an obstacle. What we try to do here is say, no, government's an important function. How do we make it work better for you? And then how do you reduce taxes overall in all of that process? If you have a great idea, you can go to the county. We want you to go to the county first because they're our bosses. But we have also created a website. This here is our thing. You can go right on our main webpage too, which is, if you Google Rockefeller Institute, you'll get to this page too, where you can submit your ideas and comments as we're adopting this plan. And we go through every comment. So if you send them to us, we'll review it. We'll do our due diligence. So if you have an idea after this hearing today, if you have something that you don't like about what you're hearing, because we're going to share as we go along in this process, I call this the process of research in real time. You get what we get. Then it would be good to have your input on it, because we want to make sure that we have broad support with this too. So with that, that is our process. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to the county executive.
Thank you very much to both Dr. Malatras and Dr. Benjamin for being here with us today. And I know Ken, as Deputy County Executive, covers some key points, but I think it's the professional input that you provide us doing this consultant work to us that will help shape what the document will look like at the end. That the document have a certain intellectual rigor so that it passes the scrutiny that we want to go. And there are resources to be accessed if the plan that we have is a good plan and it makes sense and can be effective. But the most important part of this is what we put in as content. And so what really the state has done is create a structure for us to work in. And also by mandating certain activities, forcing us to have a dialogue that sometimes just doesn't happen informally. There's always an opportunity at any point in time for municipalities and the county being one of them to sit down and have a dialogue about what can we do together. But there's no urgency, there's no stick or carrot attached to it.
Attention please, come to the third floor for Gaming Thursday. We have all kinds of gaming hardware, PlayStation and Wii, to old-fashioned board games. Come to Tech Central on the third floor for Gaming Thursday.
other important announcements? I might place them on fire, or we may find out that the kids have a reading hour as well. So. But in all seriousness, and I know from my past experience that people in the room have also had this experience, when I served as a councilman in a local government, which is the first elected position I had, my universe was that community, that government. And, we didn't necessarily think about what was happening in the next door communities. It wasn't really relevant to us. Only now that we get to a level of government where we have to interact with other levels of government, do we start to say, what is the state doing, what is each of the municipalities doing? So this process that's going to play out involves us trying to outreach, to try to have that dialogue with people, to try to determine where those things may happen. Jim made a very important point, and that certainly will be part of whatever we modify in our resubmission, which is those areas where there are cooperation going on already. We had a press conference last week where the mayor of Mount Kisco and our head of our Department of Public Safety talked about the relationship that the county department has with Mount Kisco in providing basic police services. Portland and Ossining have had a variety of different arrangements in terms of delivering police services. Village of Tuckahoe, not as complete as some of the other municipalities, but they also use county services to some extent. There are situations and relationships out there that exist that have nothing to do with anything we've generated, but for example, in our backyard that I live in the South Shore, Village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck together have a joint sanitation commission. Those two communities and the Village of Mamaroneck together run their local cable television, LMC-TV. In Rybrook and Portchester, they collaborate on support for the local library, and they have a relationship providing fire services. In one case, there's a certain core service that Rybrook provides, but the backup protection by contractors from Portchester. So there are deals out there that exist anyway. One of the hardest things to overcome is the natural tendency, anytime you have the joining of two resources, is to determine which of the two benefits more by that joining together. And generally, the community that has less resources, or the community that has more issues and problems to deal with, is the one that can see the benefit of the consolidation together, because they then can tap into additional resources to solve a particular problem. The community that has more resources and or less problems doesn't see the need at the same level of urgency. And so one of the things that we have to do over the course of this process is to try to make sure we're dialoguing with every one of the 45 municipalities, looking at our own operation critically, and determining, regardless of what appears to be the short-term interest of any particular jurisdiction, what can we do to make cost-efficient opportunities out there to make a community that might otherwise not look at it, and determine whether or not there's an opportunity for us to do these kinds of things. And we are looking at overcoming years of a certain institutional inertia in every community. I mentioned I served on the city council. My service on that council began 30 years ago and ended 26 years ago. A lot of things have happened over those years. During my tenure on that city council, this is pre-internet. It was pre-social media. So there's a host of things now that are there, which we would never have considered during my tenure in that particular assignment, which we ought to consider now. And that's why we are trying to learn from the experiences Jim was up there on the grid of what other counties have submitted. And whatever we submitted in the past, we're trying to make sure we have a more robust proposal. But that proposal should look at what did Suffolk do, what did some of the other similar-sized counties do. And I would say any of the counties from 500,000 people or more are similar to ours. Onondaga County, Monroe County, certainly Erie, Nassau, Suffolk, are all comparable counties. When a Montgomery County can come up with a sizable amount of savings, and proportionally they're a lot smaller than us, that tells you that they're doing some creative thinking and looking very carefully at things in order to hold that sizable amount. So that's what our mission is. And as most people know, I've begun, but not yet completed, a visit to every one of the 45 municipalities board meetings. The town board, village board, city council, every one of our 45 municipalities. I have gotten through 28 so far since the first of the year, so I've got 17 more to go. And in every one of the visits, it's discussing a spirit and an attitude without necessarily saying these are the specific things that we ask you to do, and more to the tune of this is what we're going to try to do to restructure the way the county works with you. There is certain authority that the county has. We can't just give it up, but we can negotiate relationships. And we don't expect the community to give up home rule authority, which is theirs under the state law, because we are all creatures of the state government. The the county and the other village, towns, cities, and of course, not only about the school districts, they are as well. But there has to be a sea change in the way we think. That is the single most important idea that underlies this whole process. We cannot just say, this could be something that is since it's unknown, might hurt us in the future, so therefore we don't want to be involved. And we're getting some of that. We have a number of different issues on the table. Separate from this process, the state has dealt with this coming salt deduction, loss of salt deduction, and there's a strategy that the state has provided for us with charitable donations. It is something completely new. It is complicated. And there's no guarantee of its success because at any point in time the IRS may come out with something. But the question is, are we going to look at this and just say, no, we're not interested because there are imponderables, or are we going to deal with it and try to see if it can be workable? Because we're facing something very dramatic. And the loss of that tax deduction are going to hit people right between the eyes. Not everybody and not equally, but to do nothing or to ignore the willingness to look at a new strategy is foolish. And I know we had a meeting last Friday, we had a lot of folks ask questions. The questions are legitimate, and we understand that there's got to be some voluntary element to this. But the natural tendency of inertia would have us do nothing, and that really is not an option in the world we're in. I've used the analogy before that if we were merchants with a mom and pop store on the main street of any of our towns, we cannot do nothing with the change in buying patterns of online purchasing. To do nothing would be to fall behind. Ruth Walters is with us here in the room. She has a wonderful business on the Pondfield Road in downtown Bronxville. And to some extent, what she sells is something that you want to go in and see and smell and taste and so forth. And she has an online presence in addition to the bricks and mortar presence. But you can't deny that more people are staying at home in their jammies, going online and buying things, and not walking down Pondfield Road to walk into the store. So any prudent business person, tries to be creative, figure out how do I get what traffic there is, and then amplify that by having an online presence. Any of us who are not in the newspaper business, unless there's someone here reporting, but everybody can recognize that newspapers are under tremendous pressure now because the way that generations younger than I am consume their news is not the same way that I did. I grew up in a world as a kid with the 3 major television stations, and you sat with mom and dad and your siblings and you watched Cronkite or Humphrey Brinkley or whoever was on Channel 7, I don't remember. But, and then you'd have your newspapers, and you'd have so many newspapers in New York City that you had a morning newspaper, an afternoon newspaper, and an evening newspaper. One of them would have the daytime ball scores because you play that many games at night. And now it's different. You go to the cell phone, you pick it up, and you get your news out. Well, if I were in charge of a print publication, I could not stand that. I'd have to adjust. I'd have to figure out how to have an online presence, how to make that online presence work for us economically, and then at the same time be able to figure out what is it that I can do differently now that would make people attract to and see what I'm doing, because they have alternatives, and if we don't adjust to the times, then we'll be left by the wayside. And I think we have to view government in the same way. So we do have our challenges ahead. Norma Drummond is with us today. Norma is our acting planning commissioner, and she is tasked, amongst other things, with trying to help us revitalize our community development block grant program, urban consortium program. We've had it for many, many years. It was an opportunity for the smaller communities of Westchester County to bond together and bid for federal funding, and that federal funding could be channeled back to some of those municipalities, which could, on their own, put together by size and need, effective CDBG asks for money. So the bigger communities, the Yonkers, certainly the White Plains, New Rochelle's, Mount Vernon's could do it, but the Mamaroneck's and Sleepy Hollows and the Tarrytowns and Portchester couldn't. And by bonding together and us having this cooperative effort for many years was successful. Well, we lost that program because of the battle over HUD. We don't need to discuss that. But now we're trying to restart that engine, and we are running into some opposition from some individuals. We're happy that we have 20 some odd, 22 or so communities that have signed back on. Some communities, and in some cases, elected officials and staff people that were not around during the prior iteration of the program, and they're asking, 10, 15, 25 questions about whether or not we could do that. And in that narrow focus, you might say, well, what might happen if this happened, and maybe I shouldn't get involved in it? And if you want to do that, then you might stay in your house all day and never go out of the house, because You might get in your car and be in a car accident. Who can promise you that you won't? You might find that something falls from a building window and hits you on the head. But in the case of this particular effort for the CDBG program, as another indicator of what Jim and Jerry are helping us try to frame here, we have to take some version of a leap of faith, which is to say that if we find a cooperative effort and we can't be sure of every detail, we still launch off in that effort because the value is there. And for the Mamaricks and the Portchesters and the Tarrytowns and the Sleepy Hollows of the world that benefited from that program over the years, the benefit to them is obvious. It may not be equally obvious to every community. And so that leads us back to what our challenge is here. So I was not intending to go on with this 15-minute speech, so to speak, but I did want to highlight that the thinking that we have in terms of embracing this program is a practical mindedness. We know as much as anybody else knows about how assuredly we'll be able to implement this. There are going to be bumps in the road. We don't know how extensive our cooperation may be. We know that there are some state resources that will follow the efforts that we make, but the greatest effort, the greatest benefit will be the benefits we get from the savings in the way we structure ourselves. But we have to have enough faith in the process that says that together we can do something intelligent together. And that's why we launch off, not because we have an assurity that this will end up with a defined amount of positive. So let me introduce a couple of elected officials who joined us during my long speech here. I'm very pleased to have identified two members of the Westchester County Board of Legislators who have joined us. Catherine Borgia, who's with us. Catherine's head of budget and the District of Legislator Chris Johnson, who's joined by the majority leader of the Yonkers City Council, Mike Sabatino. The city budget last night after a very difficult, contentious period of time. So if Mike was a little bit tired, he's earned it. And about 6 months from today, Mike, take a look at how we look, Chris. Because it's going to look a lot like the same that you're feeling right now. But have I missed anybody else that I need to? Oh, yes, we also have the head of our local CSEA unit, Karen McCord, is with us here. Everybody else. So I know that my thoughts have come as we've already gotten into the program a little bit, but I appreciate sharing with us. This meeting obviously is part of the process, so we have to have a number of these public meetings. We have one coming up this evening in Mount Kisco, similar situation, different part of the county, the Traction River attends there. And then, as pointed out on the timeline by Jim, once we have a plan in place, something that in draft form that the Board of Legislators has a chance to interact with, we will have another public hearing, and there we will have a proposal in front of us to react off of and to look at and to scrutinize and to make commentary on. But for those of you who are here voluntarily, I assume there's a few of you that have asked to be here. But for those of you here voluntarily, we appreciate your time and effort. I don't know if we're ready to go to any general comments. We've got a video. Okay.
No.
We don't. We do.
No.
We don't. Okay. I'm going to introduce Kathy Kaufman, or I'm going to recognize Kathy Kaufman.
To speak.
Oh, to speak. Okay. And she's the third speaker. That's a lot of speakers.
That was the only card we took so far.
Okay, very good. Well, Kathy, the floor is yours. Please feel free to take the next hour. Anybody else ready to speak?
Don't say that, you will regret it.
Kathy Kaufman is Westchester Coalition for Police Reform. Thank you, Kathy.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for hosting this. I'm really excited to be here. I didn't know anything about shared services, and I'm really hoping there will be an opportunity for us. There are two different issues that I'm interested in addressing. One of them is a public safety. This is going to sound really, really sexy, so get ready. A Westchester County Public Safety Data Consortium, which is an idea that I've been sort of percolating for about 2 years, but really started to dig into recently. We have 45 independent policing agencies in the county. Some of them are very, very small. And because the villages are so close together, people tend to, spend time across the county lines. So this idea came up for me when I contacted my local police department. I'd heard about an incident. I said I wanted more information. They couldn't wouldn't give it to me, so I foiled the police blotter and found out that they don't maintain any data on incidents that don't result in an arrest or a fine. So over time, I came to realize that we have 45 different agencies and various levels of data collection and almost no standardization. So the idea here is that we could potentially realize savings and more evidence-based approach to collecting and using policing data so that public officials can really understand what's going on in their departments by creating an opt-in data consortium with standardized data fields. Anybody, any agency can upload their data, and it would allow us to benchmark our agencies, compare them to others in the county in terms of public safety, create public information opportunities, where is crime happening, where are incidents occurring, where is safety a problem, and would allow us to also consider reorganization that would allow us to deploy officers more effectively and efficiently. In particular, I'm interested in the primary data set that's recommended for understanding whether racial profiling is occurring. We have almost no agencies in the county that currently collect, as far as I understand, race and demographic data that are recommended nationally for being able to ascertain whether we're at risk of being sued on grounds of racial profiling. So all of this I see as actually a small project, but one that would allow communities to opt in, share infrastructure, and really gain through the use of information and kind of move into the 21st century. And I would really love to hear more about how this might jive with the other projects and kinds of ideas that you all have for sharing infrastructure across the county. Thanks very much.
Kathy, thanks very much, and I would encourage, not just you, but anybody else, if you have thoughts that you want to put in writing to us, Emily, do we have a street email address for shared services at?
Could I add one more thing I forgot to mention?
No, of course.
I'm also hoping to find academic collaborators so that we could use the creation of this project as a learning opportunity for Westchester Community College students. So if anyone knows of somebody who might be interested in collaborating and producing this project, I would love to make this also an academically based program.
What did you call your public safety?
It's Westchester County Public Safety, WCOPS, Public Safety Data Consortium.
Data consortium, right?
Yeah.
And where can you be reached?
I can give you my business card. I'm happy to.
And just to amplify the point I made a second ago, put up on the screen the email address for any testimony or further comments that anyone would like to make at shared services at westchestergov.com. You could feel free to share, obviously, that email address with anybody in your world so that their comments are welcome, whether they were here or not today. We want to get as wide a swath of making commentary as we can. So, Kathy, thank you for your comments and your thoughts. And again, if you want to put anything in writing that follows up on what you just did, feel free to do it to that address. We appreciate it. We have an additional speaker, Karen McCord, who I was just recently introduced. Karen, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much. I just really quick, I just wanted a clarification. And I know you're not taking questions, but we're just talking about shared services between municipalities, correct? We're not talking about outside agencies, outside partnerships with anyone?
Well, I think at this point, we can't predict what the plan would look like in its final iteration. So I have to assume that the intent is to try to find cooperative efforts between our governments, meaning the county government, the three municipal levels of government, city, village, town. It would include any of our governmental special districts, so fire districts, library districts, sewer districts where they exist in some independent fashion, and would also include our school districts as well. Now, what that looks like as we get down to an actual plan, it's kind of hard to say. There may be a not-for-profit element that ties into this, depending on what it is that we're doing. So I couldn't be 100% predictive of what it would look like. That's why the last public hearing will come after there's an actual plan, and actually they submit to the Board of Legislators. So the legislators, which may decide to hold other meetings to discuss this, and obviously it happens in the legislative branch, by definition is an open public meeting. And then having a formal public hearing, so you'd see a plan, and if you saw something in it that you thought affected your members, if that's the basis of your concern, then you'd be able to comment at that time, formally on the record, and then of course informally with any of us before we adopt the plan. The one thing that's fixed is the target date, which is all has to be together. What the final plan looks like is really subject to what the Board of Legislators and the executive branch chooses to make with good advice on our consultants. One thing I would suggest, and I don't know how reachable this is, but if you're looking for some idea of what this could look like, aside from the plan that Westchester submitted, I would make the outreach, and perhaps Jim and Jerry can help us do this, with some of the other plans that other counties have put together. So you can see what it looks like in another county, and then determine if it looks like something that you could have a concern about, or hopefully something you can be supportive of.
Yeah, we'll put those up, Johnny, because we have the link, we have all 34 plans.
Okay.
And then we have a summary plan, a summary report, so you don't have to read through 34 plans that we released in October of last year, which kind of lays out nicely where folks are going.
Thank you very much.
This sheet has the link to the guide that Dr. Malachis is talking about. A lot of the information that the state, which is the creator of this plan, has, including the possibility for local government grants from the Department of State. It has a resource guide for citizens that was put together with the Maxwell School at Syracuse, and some other information. So if you are, like me, so fascinated by this topic, feel free to take one of these, and these links can give people more information about the different plans and programs to support this effort.
Thank you, Karen. We don't have any cards for anybody else who wishes to be heard. If there's anybody who'd like to express a comment, a question, to the extent that they can be answered, and they can't be, many of these things are yet to be answered, we'll certainly log it into something we want to address as we go forward. If anybody else wishes to speak, by all means, we're here. We officially held the meeting until 5 o'clock.
I bailed myself back because I'm a professor and I tend to go on and on. Let me say a couple of things.
Yes, please, Chair.
First, we're interested in not only successes, which there are a large number of, but also failures. One thing that happens with local governments is they have attempts to work together and they find barriers, and they then get frustrated and stop. So if there's a barrier in state law that's keeping some good things from happening, we're situated to draft and advance legislation to take that barrier. Let me give you one example. In Ulster County, where I live, two towns wanted to share a former school building for a town hall. So three governments were involved. The school district wanted to sell the building, which was making available at a very modest price. Two town governments. Turns out you can't have a town hall outside your town. So special legislation was entered under the Constitution as a request from the local government. But the partisan considerations got in the way for a while, and that wasn't achievable until the state election occurred and the partisan balance changed. So so there was a barrier, and we couldn't achieve anything without passing a state law. That was particular. In general, the state says that I'm going to get this right, roughly right, that a justice court justice is not an attorney, can't sit outside his or her jurisdiction. But we were talking about collaborations for counsel on arraignment and providing services on a rotating basis in evening hours. And we were going to do it at a courthouse at a facility in Kingston. We couldn't get the collaboration of all the judges because there was a barrier in state law. So there was some change in state law as a consequence of discovery, I believe, in the last session. So we need to know if you want to collaborate and you can't because something's stopping you. That's something we can help with. It might have a longer term, not an immediate, but a longer term consequence. Second point, proximity is not necessary. tend to think of sharing as requiring being next door to someone. So we'll share a facility to serve trucks, maintain trucks. We'll share a salt shed. But in a high-tech world, a lot of stuff gets done electronically. So governments can collaborate that aren't proximate to each other on many things. And that opens up possibilities that are relatively, at least not absolutely new compared to when we started thinking about it. So that's the second point. Third point, we don't want to get into veto situations, and that's very important. People are maybe a little skeptical, and there are a lot of reasons why they're wrong when you talk on and on and on. Do that, but we want to get started. If 3 governments want to do it, if 6 governments want to do it, you get started, and then the people next door or the county or read the newspaper say, 6 governments are doing this, it makes sense, won't it help us too? So dynamic develops. So it's not only the immediate achievement and the resources that can be gained by immediate collaboration, which is important and it incentivizes behavior, but the turn of mind that the county executive, I think is the most important point that I've heard made. The predisposition to do this is fundamental to persistently doing it, not just doing it on a one-time basis. And that's, I think, very, very important. And I wrote a county charter, helped write the city of New York charter, and we put stuff in there because we thought they were desirable, but it wouldn't happen. People have to make it happen. And they have to make it happen because they want it to happen. They think it's a good thing that's happening, and they think it's a positive way. We're trying to create that context as part of this process. It's kind of an ephemeral, a less tangible aspect, but it's very important.
Thank you, Chair. That's great insight. Doctor, did you want to share any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm Dr. Massa, and I have a question and a comment. You probably mentioned this, but I'm familiar with the Rockefeller Institute, and I've worked with it, as a matter of fact, but I don't understand the connection between what we're talking about and the collaborations and so on, and the Institute.
The Benjamin Center, I have, unfortunately, a gambling debt with Jerry. So this is a way to pay it off.
It's the basis of his entire career.
The Rockefeller Institute. So we have many partnerships. The Rockefeller Institute's been around for 40 years or so. We've focused on local government for a long time. Dr. Benjamin is on our board. And he is also a local government expert who owns his own institute. Part of what we find is this collaborative effort has been able to forward a lot of stuff. So it's just 2 institutions that really focus on these issues, and I think that's why we partner so much together, because we bring Jerry comes from local government as well as the academic thing. I come from state government, so we have this unique position. That's why we partner together on so many things and work with local communities.
And then, excuse me, George?
Yes.
Do you have just 2 seconds?
I do.
Okay, because I want you to hear this. I work with Indivisible of New Rochelle and also New York, New Rochelle Against Racism. And I'm basically sitting in government matters. However, I have to say that Mr. Latimer, I don't know him. I have to say I'm not on his payroll. I don't know him. I've heard him speak, is one of, to me, the most sincere and really his willingness. His willingness to really open up matters to the public is really not only hopeful, but almost unbelievable to me. It really is. And I would like to suggest that we give him a round of applause.
From my perspective, that this is a team effort, and Ken Jenkins, his deputy, some of the other people in the room who are part of our new team, Board of Legislative members, have actually actually going out to consult on a cooperative effort between a couple of legislators and myself, and that we brought on Jerry and Jim and their operation tells me that if we do have success, it will be all of us doing it. So I appreciate the personal accolades, but hopefully we'll do it together, and it'll be really tangible. It won't just be a nice thing to have said. We're hoping something done. But thank you, I appreciate it.
Yes, the tangibility. Just let me add, getting the last word. Yes, I understand and agree with everything you're saying. However, as we you can see from your predecessor, it is leadership that sets the tone and the movement and the trends. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
I'll be back.
Yes, ma'am.
I might wait for the county executive to come back.
We're getting this on the record, so we'll have an opportunity to hear you speak. So if you come up to the microphone, that's what we have you on the record. Thank you.
My name is Tracy Brown, Director of Safe and Sound, and I have a 2-point question. First of all, I'm interested in what the county's thoughts on consolidating the sewer collection system, the trunk lines, and the feed lines that are currently owned by all of the towns and villages around the county. They are in a state of disrepair, and it's our strongly held belief that there's real efficiencies and benefits in terms of both financial savings that the county maintaining those lines like they do the trunk lines and the plants, and also there are going to be environmental benefits as well, and public health benefits. However, when I discussed this with staff, the Department of Public Works, they are unenthusiastic because our county planning board has very little authority to do other activities that are required to ensure that we're keeping inflow and infiltration, groundwater, stormwater, and all of these other water sources out of our sewer lines and out of our sewer plants for a whole variety of reasons, for raw sewage overflows not to happen, for the plants to run more efficiently, and for us to not be spending our tax dollars treating rainwater and groundwater, etc. But because our county charter is unique in the state in that it really doesn't give our county planning board any authority except to voice an opinion, which can just pretty much be easily discounted by local communities making local planning decisions. You know, the county staff doesn't want to take on this responsibility of repair when they have no ability to influence poor planning decisions, like, for example, building a ton of new housing, below the floodplain, or where there's high groundwater in areas where there is currently building going on across the county. So we would need a state law to be modified. We need to amend the Westchester County Charter in order to give Westchester County Planning Board similar authority that other county planning boards have across the state to basically, when they issue an opinion, for the local planning board to have a supermajority in order to override or, not more seriously address the recommendations of the planning board. Right now, our county planning board, you just need one vote, and you can say thank you very much, and even if they give a really well thought out opinion on why certain plans shouldn't go forward, you just need one vote, which is very easy for developers to get. Developers, the heavy local law that we have in Westchester County is very favorable to developers. So to your point, Mr. Benjamin, I think that's one of our pieces of legislation that we need to address for the county to not only take over responsibility, but have a meaningful role in making sure we're being smarter, we're developing in a more sustainable way, and have a more regional planning view as we go forward.
Well, I think that's massively important. I'm interested in personally interested in drinking water and water and sewer systems and the infrastructure challenges and the great degree of decentralization, because I have research underway right now which I think will show that the decentralization enhances the problem, just the quality problem, not just the infrastructure problem. So I'd like to get precise information from you about this. And it's interesting to me that the governments have to be interested in it. For us to get it on our agenda so that the citizens could help. I'm not arguing for a massive lobbying effort, but citizens could help to make sure that their government leaders in the towns and villages think this is important, this collaborative activity. And another thing I would say, usually in hearings you don't interact, you just listen. But I would say that
We mix it up.
there's enormous capacity in the localities. So one place might have a great expert on something and the other places don't. And that expert, to be fully efficient and effective for the region, should be available to all the places. And work foregone in that location where that person's employed can be taken up by people from the other places who are getting this benefit. I think about searching out leaks in drinking water systems. Some places have the technology and the people who are really good at that. And other places don't have anybody, so they go out and hire consultants at very high prices to find the leaks. But if they work together, the net consequence could be repaired systems, lower cost, and benefit to the citizenry that doesn't have a driving process driving their cost of water, the cost of water service up. So it's simple things can be done, not just big deal stuff. So anyway, that's my lecture.
And Tracy, to the point that you're raising, that there is an effort, and to both Jerry and Jim's point, and Patty certainly knows that at the local municipality level, there are, especially on the South Shore, a great deal of the municipalities that want to do a consolidated sewer district to try to figure that out for the capital, because as you know, we already do it for operating and maintenance for the entire county. But to do that for a specific district, and there's certainly challenges to get through that. But the local municipalities, as Jerry was just talking about, that's part of that push to say this is what we need and say how we can do that shared service, because that's how we had that. And the only place in the county, by the way, that still does have the requirement to have a supermajority, which is the city of Yonkers, to do that. But the infiltration opportunities, when we talked about that and collaborating throughout the county, which is how we came up to a specific program that allowed Yonkers to join with those municipalities from around the county to do inflow and infiltration and to be able to do some things differently. So to the point that you're raising, and Jerry was raising before, talking to your local municipal officials to say that this is an idea that they would like to see in the list is certainly the way to continue to go. Because again, as a person that has way too much information, for me personally, way too much information about tertiary treatment, ultraviolet treatment systems, and rainwater and secondary treatment and all that kind of stuff. That since we have not eaten right now, it's okay. But at the end of the day, the point that you're raising, Tracy, is to continue to be involved and to make sure to help have your municipalities do that. So whether it's the northern part of Westchester, where we're concerned about stormwater runoff and MS4 regulations and all the kind of things that we need to do, or whether they're concerned, as Legislator Johnson would be concerned, and when I was a legislator, with the pumping station that's right up the block here, and the biggest sewer treatment plant in the county, which treats mostly the majority of the county's wastewater treatment here in Yonkers. So no question about that. Let's keep that going, and certainly it's something.
Let me say something else. Forgive me, but a lot of people who care a lot about this won't see this as an opportunity to do something about it. I mean, people's minds are trapped. Here's where we get money for water systems. Here's where we get money for sewer systems. Here's how we buy it. Here's the grant program. But here's this kind of general pot of money that doesn't reward water systems and sewer systems. It rewards collaboration. And it's like a light bulb, not a LED light bulb going off. Oh, you mean I can get money for that over here? I don't have to go over there. That gap has to be closed. And it's kind of remarkable what can be achieved if people think kind of creatively about not the opportunity they wish they have, but the opportunity they have being turned to their purpose.
Both of these that we've heard too, which is what we like. What we're hearing is it's not just a tax savings idea, right? It's at least better data, better management, better response time. It's better production of water quality. Those are the types of things we like to hear, because those are the things that ultimately communities get behind. So it has, like Jerry says, a new way of thinking about community health and other things. We want to hear that in this context as well.
Thank you. So, I do know the South Shore communities have asked for this, because we are working with them, to your point, very actively on this issue. So is it in the revised shared services proposal that's going to the state?
We're building it now, so.
We're getting our ideas by doing that. And by the way, the police stuff is very much linked to the whole criminal justice system. So the jails, the people who are entering court, they're under indictment dated. data is not shared. Sometimes there's a barrier to sharing court data, so there's a lot of embedded issues.
Yeah, I've already spoken to corrections and, there are a bunch of different agencies that I think, it can grow, really. It's a very dynamic kind of platform, so.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Lisa Diaz. I am a long-term resident of the Bronx in Westchester County, and I'm a capitalist. I worked at Goldman Sachs for 2 decades, and I left my career to try to make a difference, particularly in the area of smart cities. And one of the observations is if you look at the relationship and the need to have public-private partnerships, I'd like to talk to you about that. Because there's a big disconnect between the efficiency of some of the norms that are in place from the private sector and the perception, which frankly I think is a misperception of the motivations of the private sector. I happened to attend the airport hearing, and I was frankly quite disturbed that the expectations of the private sector were so negative when most people of Westchester County are actually employees, and these are some of the biggest employers in Westchester County, as well as providers of government service. So I wanted to sort of talk to you about thoughts about successful public-private partnerships. Tracy and I are friends, and when you talk about expertise in water, most of the water system is 100 years old. Call me silly, but it doesn't sort of think that there's living, breathing experts. Besides, there's Tracy, but there's also a company called Xylem that's in Westchester County. And the person, Patrick Decker, who's actually CEO, is on the bipartisan council that's focusing on infrastructure. So I guess I would counsel, if there's certain issues, water is one. Ken, you and I have talked about, I don't know if everyone knows, but in the city of Mount Vernon since 2003, there has been raw sewage pouring into the Bronx River. It doesn't sort of feel like, to me, that much is going to be done about it. And is there an opportunity to focus on some of these issues? So,
the plans manifest themselves in a number of ways, right? Proposals. And the one model that comes to mind where private sector matches up with the public sector and it's more of a cooperative thing is going to be the energy space. Mm-hmm. And that's where also it links up the savings with the other goals of communities, which was renewable energy, cleaner energy. The community aggregation model on some level was one of those things that came out of this process, for instance. The private sector is involved because they're offering sort of the service, right, through the SEO and other things, right? So it's a private sector model. It's in coordination with the public sector, municipalities. And then how do you want it as a community to form that model in Westchester, for instance, which was community driven, by the way. It wasn't driven by government. There was a savings element that people really liked, and there was the renewable element that people really liked. So that way it looks in Westchester is different than maybe how it look in Albany, by the way, loves the Westchester model. So that's one area that you see a lot of cross-collaboration. The health area is another one, too, where you bring not just the private sector in to help manage the process, but provide the data analytics to make sure that you're getting the plans and proposals that you need in place for not just now, but 10 years from now, and 20 years from now, because the scary thing, Jerry's probably working on this more than I have, benefits are outpacing salaries in municipalities right now, right? So unless you bend that cost curve, and that's bending a cost curve, it doesn't mean reducing services, but how do you look at it in a fundamentally different way? You see a lot of collaboration there. So you see this, but it does take creativity, and it takes, I think what we are trying to facilitate is trust and cooperation. That's always the most difficult thing when you sit anybody down, because everybody has their thing. Even if you're in government or outside of government, then you put them all together, and then it's really like, well, you're the private sector, the public sector, I'm a village, I'm a town, I'm a county, I'm a special district. I don't even know what the name of my special district is. I'm special sewer district number 27. I've never heard of sewer district number 27. Yeah, but I have taxing authority. Did you know that? Right? Getting the people just to sit down and have that, that's what we're trying to facilitate. I think that's what the county executive has made the mission of this process. So I think you'll see these different things. Public's not good, private's not bad. It's whoever wants to be at the table participating in this process, we will have a seat at the table to help facilitate better production of services for the communities.
So
Let me say, there's one danger in that a person who's used to a rational world will come to the government, organization of government in New York and throw their hands up. I mean, the government organization in New York is the result of historic development over 300 years of adding things on and not taking things away. So then they're attracted to cutting the Gordian knot. We can only make this irrational, different ideas of rationality, but restructure this, everything will be better. But that's a killer. Every time somebody proposes that, massive failure results. My experience, it's been a long time, is that you do what we're doing now, get people to work together, and one day they determine that they can do away with some of the infrastructure. Their idea of community won't go away. The kids won't go to bad schools, if we do some more structural things. You have to address the functions first.
Well, just going back to the water issue, New York City has Tracy's way more the expert than I am, some of the best quality water systems. And to give you some numbers, there's almost 9 million people within New York City, and they have 14 wastewater treatment plants. We have, I think it's 900,000, and we have 7. And I don't think it takes a rocket science to figure out water is a centralized entity. So to Tracy's point, if you're going to fix this 100-year-old system, and I think estimates it's going to cost about $600 million, you need to have a centralized approach and technology that requires expertise. So I guess this is a long-winded way of saying the private sector is not evil. Phil Murphy, who's now the governor of New Jersey, comes from Goldman Sachs. Mike Bloomberg is a businessman, so I think there is a way to navigate it. But I've worked and it's been an eye-opening experience for me leaving the private sector to do work in the public sector. But I think you have to set priorities, and I guess I'd like to make a formal comment that as a Westchester resident, I think we need to fix this water issue. I'm very disturbed by what's happening in Mount Vernon, and it's been allowed to exist for 15 years. And it's polluting downriver, and there are solutions. So I look forward, I think Tracy and I think we could get Patrick Decker involved to discuss some reasonable public-private partnerships and solutions. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to speak? All right. Well, first, thank you all so much for your time this afternoon and sharing your thoughts, but we want to make sure, again, for two different things, certainly for sending in written comments to sharedservices@westchestergov.com, so certainly continue to send that information in. If you go on the county website, westchestergov.com/shared services and shared with the dash in between it, you'll be able to see the form, and that will go in as well. Dr. Malhotra said that there is on their Rockefeller Institute website, there's a link there as well. Emily said that on the list that we have here, we have those pages here for those that are interested, that you have those links as well. We want to say again, thank you for everyone for this afternoon. We're going to be heading up to Mount Kisco for a 7 o'clock version of this, but again, the real effort, as the county executive said, and County Executive Latimer said, and certainly all the members of the team, Jim, Jerry, and Patty, all said the same thing, which is this is part of the effort, that your push is going to help all of us work together to get things on that list and to make sure that we're thinking differently about how we can solve some of the problems that we have from a shared services perspective, but also thinking outside of the box altogether on different things, and whether it's public-private partnerships or anything else that having to come up to those solutions. So there is some money available for it. Obviously, it's not all the money that's available, and obviously we're going to need some solutions to deal with that as well. Right? Again, thanks a lot. Have a great afternoon.